think listening to records as a kid is what got me into it. I think it became a pastime and a hobby to just sit in my bedroom and listen to records and try to kind of find unusual albums or experiment with things, with different types of music, just as a fan and as a listener, and discovering music that was sort of outside of what I heard on commercial radio all the time. But I think without realizing it at the time, as a kid, I was, in a sense, sort of going to music school, going to songwriting school, going to record production school just by being a fan and listening to records. And I was probably 16 when I started playing drums and was in a band and started focusing on the idea of being a musician might be something that I want to do. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't something that I was serious about until I was in my later teens.
What was?
But I had such a passion for it as a fan that drove the whole thing, I think.
What were you listening to?
Well, I went through a lot of different periods. That probably, I suppose, from my memory, started with British invasion stuff. I mean, I was probably 8 years old, and it kind of branched out from there, and sort of what became 70s hard rock, and then prog, and then punk rock and post-punk, and just kind of anything and everything that I could find.
Sure. When you look back on the days of Soundgarden, and it's hard to believe, but it was over 30 years ago when you formed. How do you feel when you look back on those days? With the way that I look back on it, you were one of the bands. You guys were one of the bands that changed music. So how do you feel when you look back on it?
Well, when I look back on like the first week we were in a room together writing songs, it just felt to me like it wasn't like anything I'd heard anywhere else, and it was at a time when that was a good thing in terms of the post-punk indie scene. Like there was a really vital, expressive, amazing music scene happening during a time when commercial music was awful, and I felt like we could live in that world immediately. Like it wasn't something that we had to develop. It was literally day one, and there was something about that was just so motivating, and it was a chemistry that happened immediately. And after that, it was like the evolution of a band as we started to include other aspects musically and branched out as songwriters and tried different things and experimented with different things. But that first week is almost what stands out to me now more than anything. After that, it was just the challenge of continuing to express ourselves in different ways that felt new and fresh.
Do you think you guys knew what you were doing? I mean, I roped Soundgarden in with Pearl Jam, Alice in Chains, Nirvana. I mean, that was did you know what you were know what you were doing?
I don't know. I think that the whole point of what we wanted to do as a band and why we even formed as a band was to do something different,
sure.
To do something special, and to create our own band and our own sound and our own identity. And that kind of happens one song at a time, really. And past that, it wasn't a goal to reinvent commercial rock for the '90s. I don't think from day one that I felt like we were a band that was going to ever be embraced by commercial rock radio, for example. Mm-hmm. And I think what happened was that the music business kind of moved toward what it was that we were doing, and being a band that formed from in 1984, we were one of the earliest bands that had the ability to go from the post-punk indie world into a larger commercial arena. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't a goal, and to be honest, it was something that was kind of surprising when people first started talking about that, saying that we were a band that could appeal to a huge group. Because I just didn't see it. I didn't see MTV or commercial radio playing our songs, and then ultimately they did.
Right. When you look at the what's the motivation with the solo stuff? Do you have a lot of things that in your mind that you think aren't for a band? It's just for you. Is that the motivation for the solo stuff, or is you like just playing music yourself?
Well, that's always been there. Even from the beginning of Soundgarden, I was writing and recording songs that weren't necessarily going to be Soundgarden songs, and that's just what I do. It's who I am,
Sure.
and what I like to do. I like to write songs. I like to experiment with music, and obviously Soundgarden now being a band that's existed for over 30 years.
I know. Is that crazy?
I have a very specific idea of what that is creatively. It's kind of its own entity, and it's sort of larger than the sum of its parts. So writing songs for Soundgarden is a very different world.
Sure. Tell me a little bit about, now this is your 5th solo album, Higher Truth. Tell me a little bit about the album.
Well, the initial idea came from the acoustic touring, really, and the thought of wanting to make an entire album that's sort of written from the ground up, just as acoustic songs. Because I was really enjoying the one-man show and the acoustic touring, but I felt like it would be great if it was a living, breathing thing as opposed to always a look back at my entire career. And there's something about it that made sense to me finally, where you could draw a line from songs that I wrote in Soundgarden, Temple of the Dog,
Yep.
Audio Slave, solo songs I wrote for films all the way back to like 1990. When I stripped all that down and had it in the context of just a guy and an acoustic guitar, they seemed to all make sense in the course of 2 hours, and it sounded like it could come from one guy. So I wanted to write new music that fit into that world without it being necessarily hard rock songs or aggressive rock songs or full band instrumentation that's stripped down. It's coming from the other direction, which is they had to work stripped down first, and that was the goal. And so, I started doing that about 3 years ago and started writing songs for that and just kind of let it happen in its own time until I feel like I had the right songs.
Are you a spiritual guy?
I think that's a really broad term.
Good point.
So, there's no real answer to that that wouldn't be misconstrued.
Sure.
To me.
Sure. Okay.
So.
I'll take that.
Maybe.
A couple, what I would call rapid fire questions. Just a couple random things. What band are you into right now? Like, if you were to hit play, what would be playing?
God, that's a really good question. I'm not sure.
Wow, tough.
I'm not sure. It's like whatever would come up. Yeah, there's no like one band that I'm focusing on at the moment.
If you had to pick, this is a horrible question, but what would be one of your favorite bands of all time? If you had to pick one or two.
Well, the Beatles would probably be it.
Yeah.
And if I had to pick two, then maybe it would be the Beatles and Led Zeppelin.
Nice. What's best cover song for you to play that you love to play?
The best cover song?
Yeah. Is there a cover song that you just kind of pull out and you go, I love playing this song?
Been Loving You Too Long, the Otis Redding version,
Wow.
which I've done like maybe 5 times, but whenever I do it, I really love it.
Cool. And last but not least, if you had to pick one taco, what would it be?
One with a human hand in it.
I'll quote you on that. Awesome, Chris. Man, that's
Okay.
it for me, man. I really appreciate you giving me the time, and I'm excited for you coming to Jacksonville.
All right, thank you.
All right, thanks, Chris.
All right, take care.
Bye.